welcome. I'm Dakian, and this is my very first review video about a painting guide. I have chosen for this first review to take on a book known as Kevin Dallamore's Painting and Modeling Guide Masterclass. It's published by Foundry Ventures, or the Wargames Foundry. It costs about 40 euros from their website. It is some 300 plus pages. As you can see, it is a hardcover book. The insides are full color, glossy paper, very high quality, and contains a lot of information. Now, this book is actually a sort of follow-up to their previous book from Foundry Ventures, which is this one, the Foundry Ventures Painting and Modeling Guide. I'm not reviewing this book because it is currently out of print. It's not terribly difficult to find a copy of it. I got a very good quality used copy myself. But I'm not reviewing it because there is also already a very extensive review of it on YouTube by Christopher at AG Productions. I'll put a link to that review in the notes. So instead, I'm looking at the newer book. Now, what does the newer book contain? Well, as I said, it is in full color. It has lots of pictures of everything, and let's see if we can find a typical. Here's a typical example of how it sets up a tutorial with lots of individual pictures of each stage and specific instructions about every little portion along the way. So it's very thorough that way. The last thing I want to show you before I start talking in general is to show you the contents. Now, if you look at the contents, you will find it's not set up to be read cover to cover because it jumps back and forth. It starts with a few chapters on the basics of painting and then goes into something called a modeling interlude, which is what it is. It talks about modeling and vehicles for a little while and then jumps back to techniques used more by figure painters, and it talks about fantasy and science fiction, and then suddenly here it's vehicles again, and then it's back to ancient miniatures, and then buildings, and Napoleonics, and conversions, and some other types of miniatures, and then hey, dioramas, World War II, and then another modeling interlude. So it skips back and forth in almost each chapter between painting miniatures and painting something else like vehicles or terrain or dioramas, which means if you read it from start to finish, it would seem very confusing and jumbled. But I don't think it's supposed to be read that way. It's supposed to be a resource manual, a place where you go to look up a certain technique. So if you say want to do, I want to learn how to paint leather. I find that here on page 93. And so I turn to page 93. And I don't bother reading the parts after it. So the question then becomes, is the quality of instruction any good? Well, let's talk about that for a while. The instructions in the book are given in a couple of different ways. Some few chapters like this on varnishing just explains basic concepts and what sort of products you should use, for example. But the majority of it is actually very detailed step-by-step instructions. Let's see if we can find an example. Here, for example, to paint an orc, they have pictures and words, of course, because it's a book, showing every step along the way. And every little portion of the miniature, almost every layer of paint, and all the way to the finished product. So this is 6 pages just to paint one miniature. And most of it is this detailed and clear and very easy to understand because it has this marriage of words and pictures. That's the thing you need in a book. When you don't have I mean, video instructions are different because then you see the person actually putting the paint onto the miniature, and then you understand very clearly what's being done. If you can't see that directly, then you have to take a still picture after every single step. So you know that, okay, after I do one thing, it looks like this. After I do another thing, it looks like this. And so on, and so on. And this book is very, very didactic in a good way. So, yeah, the quality of instruction is good. Let's give some finishing remarks, shall we? Now, the shortest possible version of a review I can give is, well, the answer to the question of do I recommend this book is yes. Yes, I do. Slightly more complex answer. The question is, who do I recommend it for? Well, as Kevin himself notes here when he starts describing his three-color method, which is his basic way of painting, he doesn't explain it fully in this book. He refers back to the previous book. And I would say that if you are a novice, if you're a complete novice, if you have not painted at all before or painted very few models ever, and you have difficulty understanding things like what is a shade, a midtone, and a highlight, then yes, you should track down a copy of the older book. If, however, you do understand those concepts I just rattled off, then you can grasp the three-color method very, very simply. It's, in essence, simply layering from dark to light with three shades. And the way he describes it, he also uses the Foundry paints because that's the company that employs him. So, of course, he makes a little bit of advertising for them. They sell paints in these triads with the shade, the midtone, and the highlight. Kind of like Reaper do, for example. And using just three colors for each portion of the miniature provides a pleasing effect. It's kind of stylized, but for one thing, that suits the sculpts of Foundry miniatures very well, because they are stylized to begin with. And secondly, it's perfectly alright for tabletop use. I mean, if you want something to stand out on a gaming table, then making the highlights and the transitions very clear is a good way to do that. Now, of course, if you want to do nicer looking miniatures, if you want to paint to a display standard, then you're going to have to develop this by mixing colors and doing more shades. But I think you can work that out for yourself. So, what does this book contain then if it doesn't contain the basics? It contains a lot of different permutations of it, a lot of different variants, a lot of different ways to use the knowledge you have. And it also contains, you might have noticed in the contents page that there were more names than Kevin Dalmore, for example. Here is another name who describes a specific technique. And the book is chock full of perspectives and insights from a lot of different painters. And this is perhaps one of the most valuable things about it, that it has a variety of perspectives. It's not just one guy explaining things to you. And this is a book that I've owned for several years and I've yet to exhaust its possibilities. You can come back to it again and again and learn new things. And that is the mark of a really, really high quality piece of instruction, is that you don't exhaust it in one reading or viewing if it's a DVD. So, if you want a reference work that will last you a long, long time, that is sturdy, well put together, and yeah, just a quality product all around,
then I recommend this book. And I think that's all I have to say about it right now. So, for now, this is Doc Eon, signing off.